Raise your hand if you've ever tried to learn a new language or instrument. Ever tried to get in shape? Ever tried to take a difficult class or maybe change careers? What about eat better? Almost everyone in this room has attempted one of these things or something equally as challenging. For me as a graduate student, I spend my time trying to figure out how I can write more and how I can be more productive, but the idea is the same. Studying psychology is particularly useful for this endeavor because I've gotten to learn some of the basic fundamentals behind self-regulation and motivation. I'm happy to share some of these today, in part because they also translate to other aspects of life aside from just being more productive. So you, like me, might have asked yourself at some point, why is it that some people are so successful in achieving their goals? What makes them so able to self-regulate? And you might have also asked, how can we adapt some of their strategies so that we can be better self-regulators too and maybe achieve some of our goals? You really need to understand self-regulation for this. And the research begins with the marshmallow test. By show of hands, people who have heard of the marshmallow test. Wow, all right. So for those of you who don't know, the marshmallow test, very easy. It's a measure of self-regulation in children. You put a kid at a table and you put a marshmallow in front of them for 5 minutes. If they resist for 5 minutes, they get 2 marshmallows. They can eat it at any point they want, but it's basically a measure of self-regulation. We usually find that in the marshmallow test, your score on this as a child predicts things from all aspects of your adult life. It predicts your education, predicts your income. It also predicts your relationships. Because, as simple as the test may seem, the marshmallow test belies a deeper and more profound truth, that your ability to self-regulate is central to every aspect of your life, big and small. So you might look at this and think, well, this basically just suggests that there are some people who are good at self-regulating and some people who aren't. It's basically genetic. And we used to think this. But we now know that there's a lot more to self-regulation. You could actually be very weak, but under the right circumstances, in the right situations, and with the right choices, you could become a very powerful self-regulator. So how do we do this? Obviously, people don't sit at a table and try to resist a painfully obvious temptation. This is not the way the real world works. We have all kinds of strategies we can use to help regulate our behavior, to make better decisions. And I want to demonstrate a point here, and I want you to think about Ulysses. In particular, the story of Ulysses in Homer's Odyssey, where Ulysses passes the island of the Sirens. So in the original telling of this, Ulysses had his men strap him to the mast when they were passing by the island of the Sirens so that he might resist their call. Ulysses knew that this was a temptation that he could not resist. By his own admission, he was a bad self-regulator. Ulysses couldn't control himself, but something he excelled at was planning. He made a deliberate plan to put himself in a situation, despite knowing he was a bad self-regulator, where his ability to control himself was simply easier. And that is the hallmark of a lot of good self-regulators. Not special genes, not innate ability. They recognize the power of situations. So this brings us to rule number 1. Remove your future choice, if you want to self-regulate, in hot-headed situations. Be like Ulysses and tie yourself to the mast. You can apply this to over-drinking when you go out to the bar and you'll be tempted, or when you're going to go to the grocery store and be tempted to buy sweets. Leave your credit card at home, bring only the cash you need. It's basically strapping yourself to the mast. The second rule of self-regulation is to recognize the 1% moments. Really good self-regulators recognize times when they're going to be particularly vulnerable and unable to control themselves, and they make deliberate plans around those situations. So you have been dieting all week, you're going to go to a barbecue. It's a 1% moment. You haven't had a cigarette all day, you're going to go hang out with your friends and smoke. It's a 1% moment. Cinnabons recognize 1% moments, and this is why airport Cinnabons are so successful, because at airports, you are in a very vulnerable place. You don't have the willpower to regulate. You're stressed, your flight's delayed. This is why airport Cinnabons are so successful. Rule number 3, make peer pressure your friend. Peer pressure is one of the most, if not the most powerful force that acts on our everyday lives. And with a little bit of self-regulation, with a little bit of planning, you can leverage it to your advantage. Whether it's joining an exercise class, a support network to help you keep you to your goals, or a study group that helps you keep yourself in the library for a little longer, use the power of peer pressure. You also can use verbal commitments. I do this a lot with my writing and my research. I tell advisors arbitrary deadlines, and I tell them I'm going to get something done by then. It binds me to that social commitment. You also have community commitment apps like Stick that'll provide you with an actual referee in a social network to hold you to your social goals. Rule number 4 is to eliminate the option for bad choices by making the good choice the default. So a lot of research suggests that this works especially well with retirement savings. Research shows that you can save way more in retirement if you opt into a system that automatically deducts money from your paycheck as opposed to making the deliberate choice of having to put aside 10% of every paycheck. You do not have the willpower. We all don't have the willpower to do this. But by putting ourselves in a situation where inertia is on our side and we don't have the option to even make the bad choice, people can actually save a lot more money for retirement. So rule 4, eliminate the option for bad choices, make the good choice a default and automatic thing. And rule number 5 is to use the structure of institutions. You don't have to go to college to learn what you learn in college. You could learn all of it with the information that's freely available in a library. And how many of you in this room have done that? But in general, it's much more challenging. It's way harder if you were to try to learn all of the things you learn in college by yourself. It's way easier to take a class. Classes and institutions, organizations, they provide the structure, the scheduling, the pressure to help you maintain your goals. So use the structure of institutions. So far I've talked about a few different things so far. Some of us have goals to learn a new instrument, to learn a new language, to get better at exercise, to maybe learn a new skill or get in the A in the class, or to eat healthier. Oftentimes, though, we don't have the willpower to do these things. And in the face of temptations, your emotions will not always be kind to you. I've gone over only a few of the rules that you can use for planning your situations, but the take-home message is this. There is no necessarily special gene or innate ability amongst good self-regulators. The best self-regulators recognize the power that situations have over themselves, and they make deliberate plans to put themselves in situations where self-regulation is simply easier. Keep this in mind, and like Ulysses, you can accomplish great things. Thank you, guys.